If you walked past our house on Maplewood Crescent in Brampton, Ontario, you would think it was peaceful. White siding. Neatly trimmed hedges. 2 cars in the driveway. Lights that came on every evening like clockwork. What you wouldn't know, what no one ever knew, was that inside that house lived a marriage that had been silent for 2 years. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that screams. My name is Sarah Collins. I am 38 years old, a healthcare aide by training, an immigrant by journey, a wife by law, and, for 9 long years, a woman waiting to hear the sound of a child calling me mom. This is not a story I plan to tell. It is a story that lived inside me, pressing on my chest every night, until it became heavier than shame, heavier than fear. For 2 years, my husband and I lived under the same roof and did not speak. We did not argue. We did not explain. We did not ask how the other was doing. We simply existed, 2 strangers sharing walls, electricity bills, and memories we pretended no longer belonged to us. In the mornings, we passed each other like co-workers on different shifts. At night, we slept in separate rooms, divided by a hallway that felt longer than any border I had ever crossed. His name is Daniel Collins. We met 9 years ago in Calgary, Alberta, both of us new to the country, both of us full of hope. Daniel was charming in a quiet way, steady, responsible, the kind of man families trust easily. When he asked me to marry him, I believed I was choosing safety, partnership, and a future filled with children who would grow up calling this country home. I did not know then that love can survive many things, but silence is not one of them. The doctors said we were fine. Every test came back normal. Every appointment ended with the same gentle smiles and rehearsed reassurance. Sometimes it just takes time. But time kept moving, and nothing changed. What did change was the way people looked at me. At family gatherings, the questions came disguised as concern. At church, prayers lingered too long on my empty womb. And in my marriage, disappointment slowly took the shape of resentment. The silence between Daniel and me didn't start suddenly. It grew. It began with short answers, then longer pauses, then entire days without words. Until one evening, months ago, he finally broke it. "You're free to go and start your life somewhere else," he said, standing in the kitchen, his voice flat, his eyes not meeting mine. I remember the hum of the refrigerator. The ticking clock above the microwave. The way my heart pounded, not because I was shocked, but because I had been waiting for this moment longer than I wanted to admit. I looked at him and replied calmly, "You're also free to go and start your life somewhere else." That was when he laughed. Not a happy laugh. A sharp one. "This house belongs to me," he said. I felt something rise in me, something stronger than fear. "This house belongs to me too," I replied. And I meant it. Not just legally. Emotionally. I had paid into it. I had cleaned it. I had cried in it. I had prayed in it. I had become invisible inside it. He stepped closer and said, "You won't withstand what I'm about to do." I surprised myself with my answer. "You won't withstand what I'm about to do either." I didn't know what I meant at the time. I only knew I was done being the only one hurting quietly. A few weeks later, he brought a woman into our home. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to watch television. I did not ask who she was. I did not stand up. I did not cry. I did not shout. I simply stayed there, my back straight, my face calm, my hands folded in my lap like a guest in my own life. She stayed for hours. They talked. They laughed softly. And when she left, he escorted her out like a gentleman. 2 days later, I did something I never thought I would do. I brought a man home. Daniel was there. He saw us walk in together. The man stayed for hours too. We sat in the living room. We talked. Nothing more. When it was time to leave, I dropped him off. When I returned, Daniel finally asked a question he hadn't asked in 2 years. "Who was that man?" I looked at him and said, I didn't ask you who the lady was. That was the beginning of a strange, painful dance neither of us knew how to stop. Another day, he brought another woman. Then another. 3 different women, all sitting in the same living room where I once imagined teaching our child how to walk. None of them ever went into his bedroom. They stayed where I could see them. Where I could feel them. Where silence became a weapon. The last woman looked at me and asked, confused, "Who are you?" "I'm his wife," I said. Her face changed instantly. She apologized and left. That was the first time in years I felt seen, not by my husband, but by a stranger who realized she had stepped into a war she didn't sign up for. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. One night, Daniel said something that would change everything. "Want us to, just sex," he said slowly, carefully, as if tasting the words before letting them escape. "Until you're ready to leave, until I bring someone else." I froze. The sentence could have shattered me, or broken me open. I had lived for months with a wall between us that I had built brick by brick, a wall that kept me safe from his anger, his disappointment, his absence. And now, here he was, not asking me, not pleading, telling me what he wanted, expecting me to comply. For a moment, I did nothing. I stared at him, studying the lines on his face that I had memorized, the gray that had begun to lace his hair, the subtle twitch in his left eye when he was nervous. I realized I had spent so long imagining the worst in him that I had forgotten he was human. And maybe, just maybe, he had forgotten he was married to a woman too. "I don't do free favors," I said finally, my voice calm, almost businesslike. "You want this, it has a price." Daniel's eyebrows lifted. "A price?" "Yes," I said. $1,000 each time. The silence that followed was heavy, almost sacred. It was the first negotiation we had ever had as equals. Over the next few days, we bargained like traders in a market, slowly finding a rhythm neither of us had dared admit we craved. And when we finally agreed, it was not the act itself that made my stomach twist, it was the control. For the first time in 2 years, I had something he couldn't take from me, leverage. I began keeping track. 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 8,000, by the 3rd month, I had saved $15,000. Money that belonged only to me, earned in the most unconventional way a wife could imagine in the same house as her husband. It was bitter and empowering, humiliating and freeing, all at once. And yet, beneath the businesslike exterior, something strange began to happen. Daniel, who had been mechanical and distant for years, started to slow down. He began to call my name, softly, almost apologetically. He began to hesitate before leaving, lingering a little longer, as though he were testing a boundary he had not crossed in years. One night, as he whispered my name again, I said firmly, "You're dealing with a sex worker, Daniel. Customers don't call sex workers by their names." And then, he smiled. Not the polite, obligatory smile he used to flash at family gatherings. Not the faint one that sometimes appeared when we were forced into public together. This was a real smile, wide, almost guilty, the first I had seen in 2 years. It hit me like a wave I didn't expect. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, whether to run or hold on to the moment and never let go. After that night, everything began to shift, though neither of us spoke about it. Our transactions became slower, more intimate. We didn't talk about feelings, about marriage, about children. We didn't need to. The tension in the house was different. Less like a battlefield and more like anticipation. Like both of us were waiting to see who would break first. But the twist came not from Daniel. It came from me. For the first time in months, I realized I still loved him. Despite everything. Despite the silence, the humiliation, the judgment of family and society. Despite the walls we had built. I wanted him back, not the transactional version, not the distant man I had lived with for 2 years, but the Daniel I had married, the man I had imagined would father our children. I wanted him back so badly that it scared me. And then, as if reading my mind, Daniel said the words I had been too afraid to hope for. I want my wife back. I'll do anything, anything you want. Just tell me. I looked at him and felt the old love and anger collide in my chest like thunder. My first instinct was to ask for revenge, to demand proof, to make him beg. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I sat there, counting the silent years, the money I had saved, the sacrifices I had made, and the life we had both thrown away. I stayed calm, careful. I had learned the art of observation over months of silence and negotiation. I noticed the subtle ways he softened around me. The way he left the kitchen lights on for me. The way he would hum a song I liked when he thought I wasn't listening. And the way his eyes followed me across rooms, lingering a fraction longer than they should have. Daniel, the man who once lived like a ghost in his own home, was beginning to show signs of life. Yet I couldn't trust it. Not fully. After all, this was the man who had brought women into our house while I watched. Who had turned our marriage into a strange, unspoken contest. Who had dared to test me, and I had returned the challenge. I was wary, because I had learned the hardest lesson a woman can learn: love alone does not protect you. Strategy does. I had begun to plan. Not revenge, exactly. Not hatred. But proof. Proof that I was not just the wife who couldn't give him a child, proof that I could rise above the judgments of family, of society, of women like me who had been pushed aside for failing to meet expectations. I began to save everything: my energy, my patience, and yes, the money I had earned in a way no one would approve of, but that had given me my independence. Then came the day Daniel thought he had me cornered. I think it's time, he said one evening, leaning casually against the doorway of the living room. His voice was calm, but there was a steel under it, the kind that told me he believed he was in control again. I want tonight to be about us. No bargaining. No rules. Just us. I looked at him, my eyes steady, my heart beating fast. Inside, I was calculating, remembering the dozens of hours I had spent alone, imagining the confrontation I had prepared in my mind 1,000 times. But on the surface, I smiled. I let him believe he was leading, that he was winning. The night unfolded slowly. Daniel moved closer, whispering my name, trying to ignite a flame I wasn't ready to give freely. And then, just as he thought he had me, I did something unexpected. Something that caught him off guard, made him pause, made him remember that the woman he married was not the woman who had spent 2 years silent. I need a glass of water, I said softly. My tone was innocent, polite. But as I walked past him, I reached into my bag and pulled out something he hadn't expected, something I had been hiding for weeks, a small notebook, filled with everything. Every observation. Every transaction. Every interaction with every person who had come into our house. Every word he had whispered in those long, silent nights. I had written it all down, not to punish him, but to remind both of us that silence is never empty. Silence is full of memory, of witness, of power. Daniel's eyes widened. That first flicker of fear crossed his face, the first I had seen since our silence began. He realized, at that moment, that I was not just reacting anymore. I was orchestrating. I was in control. And then he smiled. That strange, complicated smile. The one that made me question whether I hated him or still loved him more than I should. You've changed, he said, almost admiringly. No, I replied. I've survived. The twist, the revelation that would mark a turning point in our marriage, came the next morning. I had left the notebook on the dining table where he couldn't miss it. When he opened it, he found every truth laid bare, not as a weapon, but as evidence that I had endured, that I had played the game differently than he ever imagined. He looked up at me, stunned, a little vulnerable, a little afraid. And in that moment, I knew something profound: power doesn't always belong to the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes, it belongs to the one who knows the rules, the one who waits, the one who understands that patience can be a weapon far sharper than anger. That day, Daniel said nothing. He just looked at me. And I smiled, the kind of smile that comes from someone who knows she is untouchable because she has learned the art of surviving in silence, in humiliation, in the absence of love, and yet still finding a way to turn everything around. The morning after Daniel discovered the notebook, the house felt different, lighter, yet heavier at the same time. Lighter, because for the first time in 2 years, the walls were no longer silent witnesses to our bitterness. He no longer carried the weight of unspoken resentment alone, and neither did I. He glanced at me with something I hadn't seen in years, uncertainty. And that uncertainty, it terrified him more than anger ever could. I, on the other hand, felt something strange stirring inside me, courage. Not reckless courage, but calculated courage, the kind that comes from surviving battles you never signed up for. I realized that survival wasn't about avoiding pain, it was about using it. Using it to protect yourself, to reclaim what life and others had tried to take away from you. And Daniel was about to learn a lesson I had mastered silently. Over breakfast, he tried small talk. Awkward, clumsy sentences that sounded like the man I had once adored. "Coffee's ready," he said, as though this simple act could erase 2 years of silence. I smiled politely, and inside, I laughed. 2 years of silence couldn't be erased by a cup of coffee. But it was a start. Weeks passed. Our interactions, once mechanical, now had an edge of unpredictability. He would linger, trying to gauge my mood, testing boundaries I no longer let him define. And I observed him with a precision I hadn't used since my nursing days, watching, recording mentally, understanding the smallest flickers in his face, the micro-expressions that betrayed truth. For weeks, our interactions were like a chess match. Each glance, each word, each gesture had meaning. I observed him, noting the small changes in his behavior. The way he lingered in doorways, watching me. The way he asked questions indirectly, as if trying to gauge my mood without risking confrontation. The way he had begun to speak my name with a softness I hadn't heard in years. Then came the first real test of our new dynamic. Daniel's phone buzzed late one evening, a message he tried to hide. I saw him stiffen, the familiar flicker of unease crossing his face. I didn't ask. I didn't confront. I simply waited. Because I had learned something crucial, letting someone reveal their own secrets gives you power over the situation. The next day, he attempted to regain control in subtle ways. A touch here, a compliment there, even a suggestion that we spend more time together. But I didn't react the way he expected. I smiled politely, engaged minimally, and let the tension build. It was during one of these quiet evenings that I decided to act, not impulsively, but strategically. I invited a friend, someone I trusted, to drop by. Just for tea. Casual, simple. But the effect was electric. Daniel noticed, and though he said nothing, his eyes told the truth, he felt the shift. He realized that I could still create boundaries, still control my environment, still influence the house in ways he hadn't anticipated. One afternoon, Daniel's mother called. Her voice, sharp and accusing as always, tried to manipulate the situation, to remind me of my failures, to make me feel small. But I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I listened, carefully, and then I did something that shocked even me. I laughed softly. Not mockingly. Not cruelly. But genuinely, warmly. "You're wrong," I said. "I am not defined by your expectations, nor by what I haven't done yet. I am defining myself now." Her silence on the other end was deafening. I could hear the anger simmering, but I also sensed something else, respect. She realized, perhaps too late, that the woman she had underestimated was no longer invisible. That evening, Daniel came home, quieter than usual. I could feel the tension, the guilt, the realization that he had underestimated me for far too long. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes, not fear of me as a woman, but fear of losing me, of realizing that the years of silence and pride had brought him closer to losing the one thing he still wanted, his wife. "Sarah. I don't want to lose you," he said softly. I looked at him, measuring his words. I wanted to scream, to run into his arms, to forgive everything instantly. But I held my ground. I had survived too long, endured too much, to let my heart override my mind now. You almost did lose me, I replied calmly. You should remember that. The following weeks were a delicate dance. Each of us testing limits, pushing boundaries, revealing just enough to keep the other on edge. Daniel's charm returned, slowly, subtly. He began leaving notes, small gestures of affection, trying to remind me of the man I had once loved. But I resisted the easy warmth. I remembered the women who had come before, the silence that had stretched across years, the pain I had endured. I refused to let nostalgia blind me again. And then came the most shocking revelation, a conversation Daniel had with his friend, caught accidentally by me, revealing that he had begun to question his family, his life choices, even himself. He had realized that he had been wrong to blame me for our childlessness, that he had allowed outside voices to poison our marriage, that he had lost sight of the love we once shared. I didn't confront him immediately. I didn't need to. Because I knew the moment would come when he would confess himself, when the words would spill without prompting. And when they did, the truth would be undeniable: I had survived. I had grown. I had turned the house we shared into a battlefield where silence, patience, and strategy became my weapons, and I had won. But even as I celebrated my quiet victory, I knew the real challenge lay ahead. Daniel had admitted he wanted me back, but our marriage was not healed. Our hearts were not synchronized. And the family that had tried to control us, to shame me, to define my worth by something I could not change, was still a looming threat. The morning sunlight in Brampton had never felt so heavy. Daniel's mother, Margaret Collins, was at our doorstep before I even had a chance to finish my coffee. Her eyes were sharp, her voice trembling with indignation. "Sarah," she began, "we need to talk. About your choices." I stayed calm. I had spent months preparing for this moment in my mind. The notebook, the observations, the patience I had cultivated, they all led to this confrontation. I met her gaze and smiled politely, the kind of smile that says, "I am unafraid." "Choices?" I asked softly, as though seeking clarification, though I already knew what she meant. "Yes," she said, her tone rising. "The people you bring here. The way you've handled yourself. The fact that Daniel. I don't know who you think you are anymore." I let her words wash over me. They were heavy, but I had grown strong in silence. I remembered all the moments I had been judged, ignored, whispered about, blamed for our childlessness. And I realized that the true power wasn't in shouting back. It was in proving, through patience and strategy, that no one, not even Margaret, could define my worth. "I am Daniel's wife," I said firmly. "I've been patient, I've been careful, and I've endured. And now, I am claiming my place, not just in this house, but in his life." Her eyes widened slightly. She had expected fear, submission, perhaps tears. Instead, she found resolve. A quiet strength that could not be intimidated. The conversation escalated. Words like failure, disappointment, and blame were thrown at me like knives. But I parried each one with facts, with composure, and with the unshakable truth that I had survived 2 years of emotional warfare in silence, and emerged stronger. Daniel, who had been standing quietly in the background, finally spoke. His voice, calm but firm, carried authority. "Mom," he said, "Sarah has been nothing but patient. She has stayed, she has endured, and she has loved me despite everything. You may not understand, but I do. And I want her in my life, my wife, the mother of our child, the partner I should have supported all these years." I watched Margaret's face crumble, the pride she wielded like a weapon melting into disbelief. The woman who had controlled our marriage from the shadows realized that her power had no hold over me. That I, the quiet, underestimated woman, had become the center of our family's new reality. Daniel turned to me then, a mix of admiration, relief, and longing in his eyes. "I was wrong," he whispered. "I've been blind. But I want to fix this. I want us back. Completely. I looked at him, the man I still loved despite everything. My heart surged, but I held steady. The love was there, yes, but it was tempered by the lessons of 2 years of survival. I had learned that love without boundaries could be dangerous. Love without strategy could be manipulated. And I had spent months learning how to survive, how to claim my worth, how to stand unafraid in my own home. You have to show it, I replied softly. Not just with words, but with actions. You have to rebuild the trust you broke. And that, I realized, was the true challenge. Not Daniel. Not his mother. But the world that had tried to define me by what I could not give, by what society expected, by what others whispered behind my back. I knew the next step was crucial, proving, not just to Daniel, but to everyone, that I was a force to be reckoned with, that I could love without losing myself, that I could endure without breaking, and that I could still create a life worth living. The first rays of January sunlight spilled into our bedroom, and for the first time in 2 years, it didn't feel heavy or cold. The house on Maplewood Crescent felt alive, not with strangers, not with tension, but with possibility. Daniel and I had survived the silent war, the negotiations, the manipulations. But survival was only the beginning. Now came the real test, healing the wounds that had festered for nearly a decade and reclaiming a life we both had longed for. I sat at the edge of the bed, my hands folded in my lap, replaying every choice I had made. Every calculated step. Every quiet observation. Every sacrifice. I had learned that endurance alone wasn't enough. What mattered was strategy married to faith, patience combined with courage, and the ability to act decisively when the moment demanded it. Daniel entered the room, his presence tentative yet filled with a new humility. The man who once thought control was power now understood something deeper: love is a collaboration, not a conquest. He didn't speak immediately, he simply stood there, watching me, and I could see the recognition in his eyes, recognition of all I had endured in silence, all I had sacrificed for the sake of our marriage and, perhaps, unknowingly, for him. "Sarah," he said finally, his voice low, almost reverent. "I don't just want us to survive. I want us to rebuild. I want to do it right this time. I'll follow your lead." I looked at him, searching his eyes, looking for the authenticity I had longed to see. And there it was, the first flicker of genuine regret, genuine love, genuine hope. But I didn't answer immediately. My heart was ready, yes, but my mind had learned that love without proof is fragile. "You've been silent, Daniel," I replied softly. And in that silence, I learned something: I can survive anything. I can endure anything. But love has to be nurtured. It has to be proven. He nodded. I saw the weight of years finally pressing on him, not just the weight of our childlessness, not just the weight of my patience, but the weight of realizing that he had almost lost the one person who had loved him unconditionally. That evening, I received a call from a fertility specialist we had visited years ago in Toronto. The clinic had a new program, something innovative, and they thought I might be eligible. My heart raced as I listened to the possibilities. Could it be? Could this finally be the moment when our long prayers were answered? Could we finally hear the sound of a child calling us mom and dad? I didn't tell Daniel immediately. I wanted to see his reaction in its purest form: raw hope, tempered by past disappointments, tested by the same patience and resilience I had cultivated over years. When I finally shared the news, he was silent for a long moment, just holding my hands, tears brimming in his eyes. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. "No," I said. "You don't. But we're here now. Together. And we have a choice: to fight for this, to do it right, and to prove that faith and love can overcome even the years of pain." In that moment, I realized the full scope of our journey. 2 years of silence, negotiations, and survival had brought us to this fragile yet powerful place. We had both been tested. We had both been broken. But now, we were ready to heal together, not just as husband and wife, but as partners who had seen the worst and decided to build something stronger than we ever imagined. And yet, the story was far from over. Daniel's mother, who had once tried to control every aspect of our lives, had not disappeared from the equation. She was watching, waiting for a sign of failure, for a misstep, for us to falter. I knew the ultimate test lay ahead, not just our ability to conceive a child, but our ability to withstand external pressures, to stand together against judgment, and to claim the happiness we had fought for in silence. As we embraced that night, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. Not the calm of certainty, but the calm of preparedness. I had survived. I had fought. I had loved and been loved in return. And now, I was ready for the final chapter, the one where hope transforms into reality, and where all the secrets, struggles, and sacrifices culminate in the moment we had been dreaming of for nearly a decade. The house on Maplewood Crescent had begun to feel alive in a way it hadn't in nearly a decade. The walls, once heavy with silence and tension, now carried echoes of laughter, tentative conversation, and moments of genuine connection. Daniel and I had begun to rebuild, not just our marriage, but the trust, respect, and intimacy that had eroded over years of disappointment. But even as we took tentative steps forward, I could feel the weight of the world pressing down. His mother, Margaret Collins, was still present in our lives, not physically, but in every judgment, every whisper, every disapproving glance that filtered through family gatherings and holiday dinners. She had watched closely, waiting for me to falter, for me to reveal some weakness that she could exploit. But she didn't know that over the past months, I had grown stronger in ways even Daniel could not yet fully grasp. One cold January morning, I received a call that made my heart pound like it hadn't in years. The fertility clinic had confirmed something I had longed for in secret: I was eligible for their specialized treatment program. My hands trembled as I listened, barely able to contain my hope. This was the moment we had prayed for, worked for, and endured for. But more than hope, there was a new responsibility. I realized that this was not just about me or Daniel, it was about reclaiming the life that society, family, and circumstance had tried to deny us. When I shared the news with Daniel, I saw the same mixture of disbelief, hope, and overwhelming emotion I had once seen in my own reflection. He sat silently, holding my hands in his, as if fearing that if he let go for even a second, this chance would vanish. "I don't deserve this," he whispered, voice choked with emotion. "No," I said, "you don't. But we're here now. And we have a choice: to fight for this, to trust God, and to believe that our prayers are being answered." That evening, the first confrontation came, not from Daniel, not from me, but from the family who had long tried to define my worth. Margaret called, her voice trembling with disbelief and something that sounded almost like fear. I don't understand," she stammered. "After everything, how is this possible?" I smiled, calmly, quietly. "It's called faith, Margaret. And patience. And the courage to endure even when the world doubts you." For the first time, I heard silence on her end, a silence that carried the weight of grudging respect. It was a small victory, but a crucial one. It was proof that the woman who had been underestimated for years had become untouchable, not because of anger or revenge, but because of resilience, strategy, and unwavering hope. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and I began treatment. Every visit, every procedure, every step forward felt like a miracle in the making. And yet, amidst the medical appointments and the cautious optimism, our relationship deepened in ways I had never imagined. He began to express gratitude in ways beyond words, through small gestures, thoughtful surprises, and a consistent presence that I had longed for but never expected. Then came the night that would forever change our lives. We were sitting together after a long day, talking softly, when Daniel took my hands in his and looked into my eyes with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Sarah," he said, "I know I have failed you. I know I have hurt you. But I am committed to you. To us. And to the family we are going to have." I felt tears prick my eyes. For years, I had dreamed of this moment, prayed for it, fought for it in silence. And now, it was real, not a fantasy, not a hope deferred, but a tangible, living truth. I believe in us, I whispered. I believe in God. And I believe in what we are building together. That night, I realized something profound. Survival had brought me here, but faith had made it possible to thrive. Love, patience, and resilience had transformed our marriage from a battlefield into a sanctuary. And most importantly, the long journey through silence, humiliation, and endurance had prepared me to cherish the miracle that was finally within reach. The house felt different that morning. The air was warmer, lighter, almost sacred. Daniel and I had walked a long, difficult path together, 2 years of silence, years of longing, of heartbreak, of judgment from family, friends, and even ourselves. And now, for the first time, it felt like the universe itself was conspiring with us. I had gone to the clinic for another checkup, my heart pounding with hope and nerves. The nurse smiled warmly as she handed me the results. "Congratulations," she said softly. "It looks like everything is progressing perfectly. You're on track." I stood frozen, the words echoing in my mind. After 9 long years of waiting, of endless tests, of prayers that sometimes felt unanswered, it was finally happening. My body, my heart, my life, everything was finally aligning with the hope I had never let go of. When I returned home, I found Daniel in the kitchen, nervously stirring a cup of tea. His face lit up when he saw me, a mixture of fear, hope, and disbelief. "How did it go?" he asked softly. I took his hands in mine, feeling the warmth that had slowly returned over the past months. "We're going to have a child," I whispered. The words hung in the air, powerful and transformative. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then, tears filled his eyes. He pulled me into an embrace, holding me like he was afraid to let go, like he was finally realizing that love, patience, and resilience had won. I can't believe it," he murmured. "After everything, we made it." I felt a flood of emotions, relief, joy, gratitude, and a deep, abiding love for the man who had endured as much as I had. I realized then that the struggles, the silence, the bargaining, and even the pain had all been preparation for this miracle. But the final test was not over. Margaret, his mother, had to see the proof. For years, she had blamed me, judged me, and dismissed my worth because we had no child. Now, I had the power not just to validate myself, but to change her perception forever. When Margaret visited the house a week later, expecting the same tension and silence, she was met with something she did not anticipate: warmth, hope, and the undeniable truth that her son and I had survived and thrived. I showed her the clinic's confirmation, and for the first time, I saw her eyes soften, not in condescension, but in respect. She could no longer deny the strength, resilience, and courage that had carried us through. In that moment, I realized something profound. It wasn't about revenge or proving her wrong, it was about claiming my life, my dignity, and my joy. And now, with Daniel by my side, we had everything we had ever wanted: a future, hope, and the promise of a child to complete our family. That night, as we sat together in the living room, I reflected on the journey, the years of silence, the heartbreak, the bargaining, the lessons in patience and strategy, the moments of fear and uncertainty. And I knew, without a doubt, that every struggle had led to this moment, this miracle that was both fragile and unbreakable. "I love you, Sarah," Daniel said, holding my hand tightly. "And I will spend every day proving it to you." "I love you too," I whispered, my heart full, my spirit soaring. And now, we have a chance to build the life we always dreamed of. As we embraced, I felt a sense of completion, not just in our marriage, but in myself. I had survived. I had endured. I had loved, strategized, and waited patiently. And now, our prayers were answered. Our miracle was real. And for the first time in 9 years, I felt the pure, unshakable joy of hope fulfilled. Before I end this story, I want to say this gently. This is my real life. I didn't share it to be judged or to be pitied. I shared it because I know someone out there is living in silence, just like I was. If you have kind words, prayers, or gentle advice, please leave them in the comments. I'm reading them, and they truly mean more than you know.
If this story touched your heart in any way, please consider subscribing to this channel. I'll be sharing more real-life stories, lessons, and moments that remind us we're not alone. Thank you for listening.